The capital of Russia is one of the most studied places on the map by various researchers. It would seem, what discoveries can archaeologists make in Moscow? In fact, this is perhaps the most mysterious and secret city in the world. For many centuries, people have been trying to uncover the secrets of the Moscow dungeons. But all in vain. The tunnels go deep into the ground for kilometers and keep much more than just sewer hatches. How could they build an entire city under Moscow? And why do local residents know nothing about it? Let's figure it out. For several centuries, information about an underground city hidden somewhere in the depths of Moscow has appeared in various sources. Diggers have repeatedly let it slip, and even wrote about it in newspapers. True, these issues are no longer easy to find. Everything was well hidden. People walk along the old Arbat Street, Nikolskaya every day, but do not even suspect what secrets are hidden in the depths beneath them. Have you heard the name Stiletsky? It was this archaeologist who was able to prove a completely different history of Moscow, and what he dug up under it is alarming. We will talk about this today. Few people know, but under the capital there is a huge number of architectural structures, which include spacious stone galleries, vast halls, and underground corridors. And also there are a lot of long stairs, bottomless wells, and walled-up doors. And what is behind them, even the most experienced diggers do not know. Moreover, almost all of this was built of white stone, like the metro. In 1912, Ignatius Stiletsky presented his own plan of underground Moscow. He stated that almost all the buildings of the 16th, 17th centuries, located in the center of the capital, are connected to the Kremlin by a whole network of underground passages, more reminiscent of a labyrinth. Who was Ignatius? This is simply an enthusiast of his business, who was able to learn much more than was allowed. He was the archaeologist who was able to reach such depths from which he had already escaped with difficulty. After all, underground Moscow is expanding to this day. It is deepening and being completed. From generation to generation, these corridors keep secrets that ordinary residents should not know about. But no matter how long the secrets are kept, people ready to unravel them will find them, and there began to emerge groups of people ready to go underground of their own free will, and they were called diggers. Despite the numerous obstacles that the authorities put in their way, citing safety requirements, diggers were able to establish that underground Moscow goes down at least 12 levels. And the center of the capital is dug up with numerous tunnels, so much that it resembles a head of cheese. It is difficult to even hypothetically imagine such a thing. After all, the size of these passages is tens and hundreds of kilometers. I think no one will argue that the Moscow Kremlin is a unique place where decisions influencing the course of world history have been made for many centuries. But there are also many secrets buried in its depths. There are hypotheses that the construction of the Kremlin began only after Aristotle Fioravanti finished the underground part of this architectural masterpiece. Then he began building the Tainitskaya Tower, and then another Italian architect took over the baton, Pietro Antonio Solari, known in Moscow under the name of Pyotr Frezin. Having finished the dungeons, they began to build the top. And now all these buried houses, windows, do not seem like something stupid and naive. According to researchers, even representatives of the Romanov dynasty did not have complete information about the secret city, and many tunnels and passages were subsequently deliberately destroyed by someone. Now diggers can hardly get into the very center of the dungeons. Many passages were filled in, or what is even more interesting, simply walled up. But information still leaks out, even through small cracks. After the first mentions of the Neglinka River collectors, many comfortable underground spaces appeared in Moscow. And you got it right. First of all, we are talking about the Moscow Metro, about which only the lazy have not talked. It would seem, what secrets can there be? People go to work. However, did you know that, for example, at the Taganskaya metro station, Circle Line, right behind the wall there are 4 more halls, but not decorated in the typical style for us. Separate underground spaces where an ordinary visitor just can't go, but there are also places where anyone can go in order to verify the reliability of the information. Taganskaya is located at a depth of 53 meters and is considered a deep-level station. So the neighboring bunker was built with the expectation of protection from a nuclear strike. Currently, the bunker is declassified and there is a museum there. Previously, the only way to get to the classified facility was through a subway tunnel and through service rooms. But now the entrance is outside and is called Bunker 42. From the photo, it seems like an ordinary Moscow house. There are plenty of them on Taganka. However, this entrance to the underground bunker is the head of a 60-meter shaft. All the windows are false. Behind the camouflage brickwork are 6-meter walls made of special concrete. They surround a labyrinth-like corridor which with its curves and armored doors was supposed to help contain the shockwave from the explosion. Inside the shaft there was an elevator and a staircase that lead to that very Bunker 42, with its own power plant, water and food supplies, and an area of more than 4,000 square meters. Imagine this is only one of many underground rooms that we know about. But how many are there in total? Although a huge part of the underground Kremlin remains unexplored to this day, Streletsky managed to visit the dungeons and, most importantly, preserve this knowledge. He was in the dungeons of the Kutafya, Arsenalnaya, and Borovitskaya towers. Interestingly, the scientist was struck by the enormous size of these rooms, because in some places the height of the basements reached 6 and sometimes 9 meters. These were real stone galleries from which several underground passages led. It is interesting that in the shaft near the Kutafya Tower, the researcher found a coffin with a knight in chainmail. It is possible that Aleksandr Streletsky saw other objects of historical value, but did not talk about them in his book. And is this not the reason for the interest in his archive from individuals and collectors? Few people know, but underground passages connect all the towers of the Kremlin and then lead in all directions, including under the Moscow River. It is possible that the tunnel system was created in case of a long siege of the ruler's residence. Cavalry units could freely gallop through the secret passages. Carts with provisions could pass, and in case of danger, the inhabitants of the royal chambers had the opportunity to leave the Kremlin captured by the enemy and come out unharmed. But as we remember, Moscow was not always the capital, because Peter I moved his residence to St. Petersburg, so subsequent representatives of the Romanov dynasty were not interested in the underground part of the Moscow Kremlin. But in vain, much information about the secret passages and rooms was lost. The tunnels themselves were blocked up, and the passage to some rooms was completely lost. And only when people forgot about everything, in 1838, the construction of the Grand Kremlin Palace began. Workers who dug a pit in this place discovered an underground church with secret passages and corridors, but they did not report the find to scientists. They simply filled all the voids with earth and rubble. However, archaeology did not bother the metro builders much either. They discovered an ancient cemetery near the Kutafya Tower. Do you know what the metro builders did? They simply took all the gravestones to the dump, and everyone forgot about this matter. According to the testimony of many people who lived and worked in the Kremlin at different times, from time to time there are holes in its ground which are simply filled with rubble and concreted. And if you consider that by the beginning of the 19th century, there was a whole system of passages and rooms under the first throne, and later subway lines were added to them, then the picture is truly frightening. All this was written long ago in the book Searches for the Library of Ivan the Terrible. The writer indicated that the tunnels he explored were in a deplorable state, and he also warned that the dilapidated voids threatened to collapse the V.I. Lenin Library, the Bolshoi Theater, the Historical Museum, the Metropole Hotel, and a number of other architectural monuments. And it seems that the archaeologists discovered everything that is under Moscow, wrote everything down in the book and told about it. But here too, not everything is so smooth. Streletsky's work was actively interfered with by the state security agencies, who were afraid that the scientists would reveal and make public some secrets that were not subject to disclosure. For example, various historians claim that along with the well-known lines of the Moscow Underground, the so-called Metro 2 was built in the capital, which was a whole network of secret transport routes and stations used by government officials. So the interests of the scientists and the state security officers did not coincide, and only scraps of the necessary information have reached us. And even despite the fact that many are accustomed to looking at the sky, looking for something in space, there are many who dig deep, finding unwanted finds. After all, these dungeons were built back in the 15th century, and maybe even earlier, because underground passages under Moscow began to appear from its foundation. Therefore, underground Moscow is still waiting for its researchers. Perhaps the time will come when the lower part of the Kremlin will open to tourists, and a real museum will be created there. But the question is, will we live to see these moments?